not far from where I'm standing, and that is the Supreme Court. It was held at Uhuru Park on the 27th of August 2010. Perhaps you'll remember the doves. It also happens to be the day that the Judiciary, I don't know whether you can see behind me, is launching the Alternative Justice Systems policy for Kenya. And joining me to discuss just that and what that means, what does the Alternative Justice Systems policy mean, and what will it mean for access to justice as we mark 10 years of the Constitution, is Joel Ngugi. Justice Joel Ngugi, so happy to have you join us this morning. So first of all, perhaps you could tell us, what is the Alternative Justice Systems policy all about?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olive, for this opportunity. So today, being Katiba Day, we are here to animate Article 159 of the Constitution. Article 159 of the Constitution, among other things, commands the judiciary to promote alternative justice systems. So we have been developing a policy that will enable the judiciary to do that. Alternative justice systems are those organic systems in communities that help them resolve their own cases. Sometimes they do it completely autonomously and independently, and sometimes they intersect with the court systems, with the courts in different ways, and sometimes they intersect with administrative agencies and state and non-state actors. But the bottom line is they are able to resolve their disputes without necessarily the disputes coming to court and they being heard by a judge or a magistrate.
Okay.
And the important thing under the Constitution is that the Constitution legitimizes those forms of dispute resolution. Our policy today formally recognizes alternative justice systems as a legitimate, constitutionally recognized form of dispute resolution.
Okay, but what offenses or what issues would qualify for arbitration? You said like at the community level.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a good question. The question you're asking is one of jurisdiction. What is the jurisdiction for these alternative justice systems? The important thing to notice is because these systems are organic, then they do not necessarily distinguish or bifurcate between criminal cases and civil cases. So when something happens at the village level, they don't start saying, is this a tort or is this a criminal offense under Article what of the Penal Code? What they realize is that there has been a harm in the community, and then they try to come up with a solution to that harm by bringing the offender or the person who's done wrong and the person who's been wronged and so forth. They don't bother to distinguish them as we do in court. They have no taxonomical distinctions between the two. So what the policy does is it follows that organic way of resolving disputes. We do not say whether it's a crime or whether it's a civil dispute, then it can be solved. What the policy does, it provides what we're calling the agency principle. The agency principle asks whether the disputants can credibly be said to have voluntarily chosen that forum of alternative justice system to resolve their cases. And if you find, as a fact finder, that they voluntarily and of their own agency chose that forum, then you respect their autonomy and their freedom, and you let the decision of that forum stand, whether it's a criminal case or whether it's a civil case. Having said that, it's important to say that there are some kinds of criminal offenses where we would say categorically, per se, we will say that the agency principle will say that the persons who've been harmed cannot credibly voluntarily choose to be in the alternative justice forum.
So not all disputes qualify?
Not all disputes qualify. For example, defilement cases.
I was going to come to that,
yes.
Because
yes.
it's a particularly sensitive subject.
Yes. So categorically, we would like to say the application of the agency principle appropriately will determine that agency defilement cases would not qualify to be resolved under the alternative justice system. Cases of rape are also, in most cases, would not qualify. Many cases involving children. That's because children cannot credibly choose to be in that forum. So the agency principle will render those cases to be inappropriate for resolution in the AJS.
Okay. So perhaps you could give us an example of what would qualify, or what a typical organic alternative dispute resolution system would look like.
So Olive, you'll be surprised to know that about 80 to 90% of the cases that we hear in our courts are actually about very small disputes. There are disputes about boundaries. Where is the boundary to my land? There are disputes about assault. Ulinichapa ngumi ukaniumiza. There are disputes about child custody, not child custody, about maintenance of children, for example. Nitalipa 2,000 ama 3,000. You know, there are questions about ulinitukana, ulinita umbo, ulinita malaya. You know, there are questions, those are a lot of the disputes that we deal with in our court system. Questions like that. Also questions about you owe me money, I gave you 200,000, you have not repaid, and so forth. All those are questions that will easily be resolved by the Agis, and quite fast at that.
Okay, alternative justice systems. So what does that entail? Do we go to the chief? Do we go to the elders? You know, who do we go to?
Very good question. When we mapped out the landscape, we discovered that there are 3 kinds of categories of alternative justice systems in Kenya. The first one is what I call autonomous justice systems. They just exist on their own in the community. They are not affiliated with any government agency or with any non-governmental agency. They just come up organically. If you go to Kibera, you will be very surprised that they have their own organic justice systems which resolve rent disputes, for example. If you go to my home village in Loitoktok, you will find that they have their own systems for resolving a lot of the disputes. We call those autonomous. They don't go to any chief. They don't go to any government agency. They don't go to any NGO or CBO. They just decide their cases. The second one are third-party affiliated. These are the ones which are affiliated with the chief, with the children's office, with NGOs, with FIDA Kenya, with ICJ Kenya, with Kituo cha Sheria, and so forth. And then the third one are court affiliated. We now have innovative courts in different parts of Kenya which have annexed these alternative justice systems to the courts through the CUCs, the Court Users Committees. So we have, for example, very innovative experiments in Isiolo, in Kangema, in Othaya, in Kitui, in Kipkelion, in Kericho, and so forth. They're doing very innovative experiments where they are annexing these alternative justice systems. So in those cases, then you know you'll go to court and you'll be able to be referred to the Agis. Okay. So those are the 3 different typologies that we have.
All right. Yes. So why did you decide to sort of like create a policy in this regard? Why was it necessary? You're saying it's organic, it happens anyway. Why the policy? Why was the policy necessary?
All right. Thank you again. Very great question. There are at least 5 good reasons, and maybe I can get to the 3 most important ones. The first one, it's a constitutional commandment. Article 159 of the Constitution requires that the judiciary promotes alternative justice system. The word promote is from the human rights discourse. It means that the judiciary is required to do certain things so that the alternative justice systems are truly animated. For us, we interpreted and unbundled that to mean that it's important that we come up with a policy that enables the judiciary to do that. But in the second place, the alternative justice systems reflect the lived realities of Kenyans. In the empirical studies that was done in 2017 by the Judiciary and Hill, we found that up to about 90% of cases in Kenya are resolved through Agis. So it's really to put our heads in the sand to pretend that this is not happening. It makes sense for us to put our gaze there and see what is happening and provide a roadmap for it so that we make sure that's in keeping with the constitutional minimums and procedural due process. But thirdly and importantly, it not only reflects the lived realities of the people, but it is a far superior form of dispute resolution for the majority of cases that Kenyans face. You go to court, you go to the Agis mechanism today, you can get your resolution today or tomorrow. There is no backlog. There is no case delay. There are no technicalities. You don't have to pay a lawyer. You don't have to pay court filing fees. You just go. You don't have to pay anybody. You just go as Mama Kadogo or as Mama Joseph, and you just argue your case, and you get your resolution. So there are very many advantages to this form of dispute resolution, aside from the efficiency perspective, where we'll be able to deal with a lot of the backlog that's facing the courts.
Okay, you've talked about a roadmap.
Yes.
What does that roadmap look like?
So the policy provides what we hope is a 5-year roadmap to where we will be in terms of truly animating alternative justice systems. The first one is what we're doing today is to formally recognize that it is a legitimate form of dispute resolution that is recognized under the Constitution. The second one is to sensitize and raise awareness to Kenyans about this form of dispute resolution and tell them not only that it's legitimate, but it is an optimal way of resolving disputes in the country. Then the third one is the policy provides specific programmatic interventions for state actors and non-state actors. The state actors are duty bearers under the Constitution and a human rights discourse, and it provides some of the interventions that they can get into to ensure that it's fully animated. And then non-state actors, in their supporting role, can also play certain roles in animating alternative justice systems. All that is in the policy.
Okay.
But most importantly, it also provides what we are calling operational doctrines for judicial officers, for judges and magistrates, to, first of all, realize and recognize alternative justice systems questions which face them in court, and then which doctrines to apply so that they get appropriate responses which promote alternative justice systems as required under the Constitution.
Okay, so do we come and register with the courts and say, okay, we are pursuing AJS out of court, and should it fail, we are coming back to you? And are some of these agreements binding? How are they going to be? How are they made binding, or is that again part of that organic nature of the resolution?
You know, Olive, you ask very good questions. I used to be a law professor, and I would say that you'd make a very good law student from the kind of questions you're asking.
Thank you.
I would say it depends on the nature of AJS mechanism that you choose. So I gave the three types, the three models, and it depends on which ones that you choose. As we said, there are some that are completely autonomous. You don't have to register with anybody. All the Constitution says is people have a right, as part of Article 1, Article 10, Article 11, Article 44 of the Constitution, it gives people a right to choose the forum in which they want to decide their cases. If they choose that forum, they don't need to inform Justice Ngugi that Justice, we are resolving our cases out here. No, they wake up in the morning and they resolve their case. It only comes to me if there is a problem. A problem arises where one of them defects. They accepted the forum. Then, when they come to the enforcement, one of them says, but you know this is a kangaroo court, so utanipeleka utadu. Then at that point is one of them might come to court. And when they come to court, that is why this policy says we've now come up with operational doctrines which guides me as a judicial officer to say if the parties had chosen of their own free will to go to that mechanism, then I am required under the Constitution to enforce the outcome of that AJS mechanism, in as long as it's in keeping with the constitutional minimums, the Bill of Rights, and procedural due process that is in the Constitution. So you don't have to register anywhere. But for some of them, they have chosen to annex or affiliate themselves with the court, and in which case it provides, the courts become sort of multi-door forums where you come and you decide, this is a court, but I want to file my case in the formal system. So you file your plaint in the formal system. But then you can decide, I want to do formal mediation. So you do court annex mediation. Or you can decide, I want to do AJS. And therefore, you file your claim under AJS. So in that way, then our courts become multi-door forums, multi-door courts, where parties can choose whichever forum that they want. When they come to court, we don't just channel them to this very formal system where we have lawyers arguing about very small things and taking a lot of time through technicalities.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you drawn, if I've heard you correctly,
Yes.
you've drawn a distinction between mediation and court-annexed mediation and AGS?
Yes. There's a clear distinction between the two. Now, the court-annexed mediation, as we have espoused it in this country today, is a very specific form of dispute resolution which uses formal method of mediation which is offered by certified mediators who are certified by the Mediation Accreditation Committee. It's a very specific form of mediation. So one way to think about it, it is a very small subset of alternative justice systems, but which must follow very specific rules that are set in the court annex mediation rules. So it's a very small subset of it. But when we talk about AJS generally, we're not talking about any system systems that are following any specific formal method. So it's distinguished from arbitration and mediation that use that formal methods of dispute resolution.
Okay. Are there other countries that have made Agis work successfully? For example, Rwanda, following the genocide, there was this talk of people sitting, in their communities and resolving some of those disagreements. So are there other jurisdictions perhaps you've borrowed from in crafting the policy?
Absolutely. Thank you. We did a lot of comparative jurisprudence analysis in coming up with this policy. We looked at Rwanda and the Gacaca courts. We looked at Uganda and the local law ordinances, local council ordinances in Uganda. We looked at South Sudan, which has a alternative justice systems bill. We've looked at Ghana. We looked at South Africa and a few other African countries. And we've borrowed from a lot of those. What we have done in Kenya, though, we believe is innovative. We believe it's in keeping with our constitution because, first of all, our constitution is unique in the sense that it requires the judiciary to be on the driver's seat of promoting alternative justice systems. We believe that that is instructive. But secondly, because of where we are as a country, because of the encounter between our customary systems with the colonial state and then with the post-colonial state and the post-colonial legal systems, then there's been quite some distortion in terms of, let me not call it, distortion might be the wrong word, let me call there's been some growth, some evolution of these systems. So it will be foolhardy to try and recreate traditional systems as they existed. This has happened in other countries like Ghana. They have a traditional courts bill. That's not where we are going. Instead, in Kenya, where we are going is more of a model of let 1,000 flowers bloom. Most of the alternative justice systems that we find in Kenya today do not strictly use customs to come up with their resolutions. They use a melange of as a source of law. They use the constitution. They use local customs of the place, not necessarily tied to a particular community. They use the evolving standards of civilization as required under Article 11 of the Constitution and so forth. So in Kenya, they're not specifically traditional in that sense. They do not try to, if you go to Kitui, they don't try to say, what would Chief Mutua in 1891 have decided? That is not what they try and do. They just try and decide their case given how Kitui is today and given the local conditions in Kitui today. And you will find that many times they are citing the Constitution, they are citing the Bible, the Quran, they're just citing their own organic wisdom in deciding these cases.
Okay.
Yes.
That may be, we may not be trying to go back to Chief. What did you call him, Chief?
Chief Mutua.
Yeah.
I don't know if he exists. That's a hypothetical chief.
But these organic systems have been there for quite a while,
yes,
as you've testified.
Yes.
So why has it taken us so long to officially, in a sense, recognize them?
Oh, Olive, you want a dissertation on this one. That's a very complex question. But the short answer to it is that both, if we're to be truthful, both the colonial state and the post-colonial state, and that is both the colonial administration of justice systems and the post-colonial administration of justice systems were hostile and sought to undermine these systems for the longest time. So they tried at times to appropriate them. At times they tried to undermine them, but mostly the relationship was one of hostility. So if you look at some of the doctrines that have come from our formal courts and how they deal with questions that come from alternative systems, customary systems of justice, you will find it's littered with pejorative doctrines like the repugnancy doctrines and so forth. And the idea is they have been looked at from the gaze and the eyes of a colonial state, Western jurisprudence, and then trying to fit them into that box.
Okay.
And so that explains one of the reasons why it has taken this long for us to come to this point. But Kenyans were very categorical in 2010 by put in the Constitution in Article 159, and that is why we are here today.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about the significance and of the day, of why you chose to launch it today.
Yes.
Thank you so very much for speaking to us. I can hear people all around me calling for you. You are the chair of the AJS. Is it a committee?
It's a task force.
Task force.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you so very much for speaking to us. Happy Katiba Day.
Happy Katiba Day. Thank you very much.
And I will have to Google some of what you said.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So they have it, the launch of the AJS. We'll speak to one more person, a Commissioner Emeritus of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. We are just sanitizing her microphone. Oh, there we go. The microphone is being sanitized so we can hand it over to her. As you heard from Justice Joel Ngugi, the launch of this policy, and that is the Alternative Justice Systems Policy for Kenya, is about increasing access to justice. That means bringing to life some of the expectations laid out in the Constitution that was launched, or rather that was promulgated, I should say, 10 years ago. As I said, I'm joined by a Commissioner Emeritus from the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, and she's just taking off her mask, and that is Commissioner Jedida Kimonyo. Did I get that right?
Sorry?
Commissioner Jedida?
Jedida Wakonyo Warohio?
Wakonyo, yes, there we go. So, Commissioner, what does today mean for you, 10 years into the current constitutional dispensation?
Wow. Today is a very great day for, not only for me, but for Wanjiko, for many Kenyans, because it's an affirmation of the efforts of the work that people of this country have been agitating for many years, and that is celebrating the Constitution of this country that was promulgated in 2010. It's a very important day because it's a day where we celebrate transformation, where we celebrate the rebirth of this nation, where we celebrate the fact that Kenyans are no longer objects, but are participants and people who are dignified to engage with this country's affairs.
Okay, actually it's a good thing you said that. I don't know whether you've been watching NTV. We've been running a series of documentaries on We the People. So you're saying that is part of what we're bringing to life today with the launch of the Alternative Justice Systems Policy for Kenya?
Yes, that's what we are doing today, because the launch of the AJS policy, the Alternative Justice Policy, is really a reflection of the lived lives, the lived realities of justice of the people of Kenya. We are saying that from a justice perspective, from administration of justice perspective, that people must participate, we must use the justice systems that they have used, that they are using, and that they want to use to ensure that justice is fair and accessible to everyone. That's why today is very important too, from an access to justice perspective. Yeah.
All right. So where were you 10 years ago?
10 years ago. That is 2010.
Yes, August the 27th.
Where was I?
When we were promulgating the Constitution.
Where was I? I was in civil society. Yes, I was in civil society.
Okay.
I was the CEO of Legal Resources Foundation. And LRF was very instrumental in some of the chapters of the Constitution. For example, the issue around the dignity was very key, because Legal Resources Foundation works with the vulnerable, the marginalized, the poor, and therefore the dignity, Article 28, was very crucial. Another area that LRF was very keen on was the issues of the rights of arrested persons. That it was important for us to affirm that even if I'm an accused person, I do not lose my rights. I'm still a human being, and therefore there is a dignified way. There is a process that we need to treat even those who are in custody, and that's why we also have the Article 50 in the Constitution.
And more, that is actually becoming something that is being widely discussed, particularly with the events that have happened in the U.S., for instance. The rights of persons even after they've been arrested.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So now, 10 years in, you tell me you are concerned mainly with the dignity, the rights of persons after being arrested. 10 years in, has the Constitution met your expectations?
The expectations in the Constitution are valid, and they're still very solid. The application, the breathing life into the Constitution is where there is a gap. I have the experience has not been good because I never thought in my life that you'd be part of the constitutional making process. You'd see your footprints in some of the articles of the Constitution and then leave the Constitution. So when that possibility happened in 2010, my expectation was that there was going to be transformation. And transformation means that the way things were prior to August 2010 were not going to be the same 10 years later in August 2020. What I see is a mirage of the Constitution. But in terms of the things that we thought from a human rights, because Chapter 4 is very robust. It is the longest chapter in the Constitution, 42 articles. But the realization of those rights is really missing in action.
Well, what makes you say it's a mirage? If you could give us some specific instances.
For example, just let's use the rights of an arrested person. The dignity is very important, how you arrest somebody, how you speak to them, how you take them into custody. That is not a practice that is the norm. You have to plead for your life. You have to plead for your dignity. You have to use other resources, and usually financial, to be able to be protected. That is not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that all of us are equal and must be treated equally before the law. So if I am a poor person, if I'm a marginalized person, if I'm an ignorant person in terms of illiteracy, I do not have that power before a state officer who is arresting me. But the state officer has an obligation to protect my right irrespective. So when you see how people are arrested, when you see our detention facilities, we still have a long way to go. When you see how different cadres of people are treated, it is not just, it is not fair. So it tells me justice is not accessible. If you think also about the way children, one of the things that the Constitution says that the custody of children is a last resort. It must be a last resort. Our first option should be keep them out of custody. But we have children in remand. We have children who are serving very petty sentences, but they're in remand. It tells me that the dream of the Constitution is yet to be realized.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not the norm to be grabbed by the seat of your pants and held in the back of a police Land Rover.
That's indignity. That's indignity.
Indignity.
Any man who is held that way will tell you that was the most embarrassing. And the Constitution is very clear: you respect and you protect my dignity.
Right.
It is not right.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Would have gone on, but I can see behind us the event is about to kick off.
Yes.
So I have to say goodbye to you as well for the moment. But NTV is #We the People. This constitutional celebration 10 years in, if that's what it is all about we the people. So keep it NTV. The hashtag, as I said, is We the People. We'll take a break, but when we come back, we'll go straight to the event behind us, which is the launch of the Alternative Justice System Policy for Kenya.
Salvador, what is your involvement regarding Francisco's death?
Is this what he does to all his victims? Is that what he did to my father?
I think I recognize this truck. Sandra, I think I know where Cheeto is.
How did Hillary find out about the whole thing? I got rid of everybody who knew about what happened to Noble.
We need to make a move now.
She's slowly losing everyone who's important to her.
We need to do something about her and deal with that woman once and for all.
They killed each other.
They didn't, sir. Anna's still alive.
Why would I even kidnap my own daughter?
Then who took her?
You tell me.
Here at NMG, we are working very hard to ensure your favorite publications, Daily Nation, Business Daily, Taifa Leo, and the East African are readily available. In a bid to support the efforts to prevent the transmission of COVID-19, NMG has ensured our staff, our distributors, and their staff adhere to set guidelines. At our printing plant, all staff are required to wash their hands before entering the factory and must be wearing a mask. All workers either change their clothes on entering the factory or wear an overcoat. We are keeping doors open to avoid our staff touching door handles repeatedly. With our automated printing, contact with the newspaper is kept to a minimum, and at the packing process, the staff observe social distancing. Vehicles used to transport the newspapers are disinfected daily before the newspapers are loaded, and our delivery staff all wear masks and wash their hands regularly. Our vendors ensure that they sanitize every time they handle money and wear their masks at all times. NMG is proud to be able to safely meet your information needs. Stay safe, stay informed with our favorite NMG publications.
The evolution brought by devolution has been televised as it sought to bring services closer to the people.
They have abused the system of devolution. It is not at all the devolution that was adopted in Burma.
The majority of Kenyans did not understand what is devolution.
Devolution was an idea whose time had come. Devolution has brought power closer to the people.
The Constitution says by the 15th of each month, money should go to the counties. Then it doesn't.
I look forward to the day when we will be sufficiently bold to reduce the number of devolved units.
The Constitution now has made health services a devolved function. So we have to implement the Constitution.
We the people, in partnership with UNDP.
This is NTV.
Ya kitaifa kutoka kwa baraza la miji kenda. Mizi similani huchisimila huna mala madzo na gadze huna mala baraka za Mulungu na bariki taifa la Kenya, ambariki chilongozi mkulu Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, ambariki makamuwe William Samuel Ruto, huna mala taifa la Kenya ripate amani, kuchirira mahakama ambaye nazunduliwa rero, huna mala mahakama ikale na amani, mahakama ikale na azee ambao wandakala na amani. Mulungu bariki Kenya, huna mala mvula ya peho inye ili hupate manufaa kaiza taifa rehu, mavyalo gavyale ili nzala igome. Hunavoyera makongo amba gazenjira kaiza taifa rehu, makongo gaga hunaamba Mulungu kuko dhulu, timisha mvula ya peho, timisha mula towa mwana Yesu, uweze kusa makongo gaga na isi yehu ikalensi ya peho, na upate maenderero, na upate umwenga, upate amani, upate nguvu, na isi yehu igaluke atuwahenzane, atuwakale na umwenga. Mulungu bariki Kenya. Amina. Similani amizi, similani ya Kenya, similani taifa rehu. Similani amizi, similani ya Kenya, similani taifa rehu. Ambaye kagenzi gaga ga taifa ra Kenya kuzahangmenga. Ambaye kagenzi gaga ga taifa ra Kenya ukala na mahakama ya atumia. Kura atumwa kazombo kuna kazumba kakasundulwa. Kachisundulwa matozi gani mvula. Uchenjiramu wakombola. Mvula kumala kunya na inye. Mvula ambayo enda nyenye ya peho. Similani.
Let's take our seats, please. Thank you very much, Mzee Moshere. And let's also welcome the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Philomena Mwilu, who was at another event at Holy Family Basilica representing the judiciary, but she's managed to make it. Now, I'll do the salutations just to mention who is here so that the other speakers don't have to necessarily go over it again because of constraints of time. So Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable David Kenani Maraba, the Deputy Chief Justice, Honorable Philomena Mwilu, the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, who is just walking in also from Holy Family Basilica, Honorable Lana Madi, judges, magistrates, and staff who are here, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, represented by Secretary of the Office, Dorcas Oduo, the EU Ambassador to Kenya, Mr. Simon Modu, the Regional Representative of UNODC, Dr. Amado Felipe de Andas, the country representative, the UN representative to Kenya, Dr. Tobias Tagavarasha, the chair of the Agis task force, Professor Justice Joel Ngugi, members of the task force represented here, various elders drawn from various communities in Kenya, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Now, welcome to the launch of the Agis policy that is being hosted today by the Judiciary as part of the 10th anniversary of the Constitution. I would like to bring to your attention that we are live from the Supreme Court. This event is running on national television, but it is also running on various virtual platforms. And for those who are watching from various parts of the country or the globe, I would like you to visit the Judiciary website or visit the AJS Kenya website, www.ajskenya.or.ke, or the Judiciary Twitter account to log in and follow the various proceedings. The day has been structured in 4 parts. The virtual sessions that we shall be having are 3. The first one has just ended. Then we have this physical session. In the afternoon, from 1 o'clock at the end of this event, we shall have another virtual session running, and then later in the afternoon, we shall have another virtual session run by Legal Hack, which will be exploring technological solutions to AJS. Clearly, the analog and the digital are not mutually exclusive with respect to AJS. Just before I invite various speakers, just a reminder that today marks 10 years since the promulgation of the Constitution. It was a day that launched the decade of great expectations. In fact, if you go to Uhuru Park today, there is a flag and a lamppost, a very high lamppost that was erected that runs 24 hours to indicate the promise of the new Constitution. For those of us who came of age in the 80s, we were accustomed to Africa and Kenya being described in the 80s as a lost decade. Low development, poverty, inequality, macroeconomic stability, one-party dictatorships of the 80s. And heck, in the 80s, we even removed the security of tenure for judges, the Attorney General, and even the Controller and Auditor General. Indeed, a lost decade. 1990s was a decade of struggle, multipartism, structural adjustment programs, cost sharing, ethnic clashes, and very miserable GDP growth rates. The 2000s was the decade of hope, peaceful power transfer, economic recovery, free primary education. The decade of 2010 to 2020, 2000 to 2010 was a decade of great expectations. A new constitution, good economic growth. In fact, in 2010, the country registered its highest economic growth since the 1970s at 8.4%. So that just tells you, I think, the sort of great expectations that people had even the new constitution. So great were those expectations that if you look at the economic data, the two elections that we've had under the new constitution have not been followed by a massive contraction or drop in the country's GDP. It's an amazing data when you look at it. It may not be directly as a result of the new constitution, but the correlation is striking nonetheless. So the decade of great expectations has been the decade where the judiciary has also been trying to transform, and what we are launching here today as AJS policy is an important limb of that journey. The question is, to what extent does AJS facilitate access to justice? How does its style of justice dispensation comport with the principles of universality of the notions of justice? And how does that style comport with our own sociology of power with respect to gender, religion, or even material wealth or class? How does the very variegated forms of AJS in a multi-ethnic and multicultural society, ours square with principles of and notions of universality? We believe these are some of the questions that the AJS policy has grappled with, and we hope that by the end of the day today, through the work that has been done by the task force led by Justice Joel Ngugi, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. It is now my pleasure to invite the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Honorable Anna Madi, to formally welcome us to this event.
Thank you, Duncan. The Honorable the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, Honorable Deputy Chief Justice and Vice President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, Your Excellency Simon Modu, the European Union Ambassador to Kenya, the Secretary Public Prosecutions, Dorcas Odwor, Judge Joel Ngugi, Chair of the AJS Task Force, our partners in the justice sector, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me just begin by apologizing for coming in late. I had Duncan mention that we had another event at the Holy Family Basilica. We expected it to end a little earlier. It took longer than expected, but we are happy that we have managed. I see the President, LSK, has joined us. Welcome, Mr. Harvey. Let me just take this opportunity to welcome you to the Judiciary on Katiba Day. It's great to have you here. It's always a joy to host our partners in events of this nature as we celebrate yet another milestone in the judiciary, which is the launch of the Alternative Justice Systems policy. Honorable Chief Justice, ladies and gentlemen, our primary role remains to exercise judicial authority given to us by the people of Kenya, and our steadfast commitment will always be to exercise this role diligently, conscientiously, and with the highest sense of responsibility to the people for whom we exist, and these are our justice seekers. Ladies and gentlemen, the judiciary has been the most transforming in trying to align the institution to the aspirations of the Constitution. The judiciary has opened up, it has been bold, it has been ambitious, and the launch of Agis today proves the transformative nature of the judiciary by giving life to Article 159(2)(c) of the Constitution. The launch of the Agis policy today joins mediation and arbitration, two of the Article family members that have been piloted and rolled out in the judiciary, and I dare say with tremendous success. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the pillars of judiciary transformation is access to justice, which demands that every Kenyan, wherever they may be, should be able to access judicial services unhindered by factors such as lack of physical access to judicial facilities, among other hindrances. Alternative justice system, a policy that is being launched today, is a demonstration that we will remain committed to ensuring that every Kenyan is able to access justice in the easiest way possible. I want to take this opportunity to appreciate the work that has been done by the Agis Task Force, led by Honorable Professor Justice Ngugi, for all the effort that they've demonstrated, the diligence, the intellect, and commitment in ensuring that Agis is institutionalized within our justice system. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all our development partners for believing in our cause and for supporting the judiciary in all its initiatives towards enhancing access to justice. May I mention the UNODC that has been with us throughout this journey. We also have the UNDP, FAO, JPIP that have walked this journey with us. We do not take all your support and your financial contribution for granted. I want to thank the leadership of the judiciary, the Honorable the Chief Justice David Maraga, the Honorable the Deputy Chief Justice for the leadership in continuing to take us to greater heights for purposes of fulfilling our constitutional mandate. We remain grateful to all our partners in the justice sector for their continued support, without which this achievement would not have been possible. Let us continue to work together in our journey of sustaining judiciary transformation to ensure access to justice for all. Thank you very much for being here. Karibuni sana. Happy Katiba Day, and may God bless us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Registrar of the Judiciary. I would like to invite the Vice Chair of the task force to come and give his remarks. And as he walks here, I just want to say, when you have a chair who is a professor and a vice chair who is a PhD holder, you can only logically come up with the topic that is supposed to speak to methodology and pedagogy. Dr. Steve Okoth.
Mheshimiwa Jaji Mkuu na viongozi wengine wa mahakama na mwenyekiti wetu wa jopo la njia mbadala za kutatua kesi na kutafuta haki, Profesa Ngugi, na wananchi wenzangu, na jiunga na wengine kukaribisha katika siku ya leo na kukushukuru wewe Jaji Mkuu kwa kutualika hapa kwenye mahakama siku kama leo, siku ambayo tunasherehekea katiba mpya. Ni siku ambayo sisi wananchi wa kawaida kwa ujumla huwa tupate nafasi ya kukuja mahakamani. Ningependa kuzungumzia kwa ufupi tu safari ambayo tumeipitia na mbinu ambazo tulizitumia wakati jaji aliyestaafu Dr. Mtunga alipotupa kazi, na wewe Jaji Mkuu wa sasa ukatuongezea muda ili tuitekeleze. Jaji Mkuu, tungependa kwanza kukukumbusha kuwa mara ya mwisho shughuli hii ilifanywa humu nchini ilikuwa ni mwaka 1948. Wakati ule viongozi wa koloni wataka kujua mbinu wanazotumia wananchi katika kutatua kesi zao ili wazijumlishe zile mbinu na koti ya dola kama hii yetu hapa. Wengine kule Afrika Kusini wamejaribu mbinu hiyo, wengine kule Papua New Guinea wamejaribu mbinu hiyo. Na basi sisi ulipotuteua na kutungozea muda, moja kati ya mambo ambayo tulichukua kama msingi wa filosofia yetu ni kusema kuwa kuendeleza mbinu hizi mbadala haihitaji mbinu zile kujumlishwa na koti ya dola kama hii yetu, lakini ataka zile mbinu ziongezewe uhuru wa kutekeleza kazi yao. Hivyo kazi tuliyoifanya sio kazi ya kuzisawazisha zile mbinu na namna koti za dola zinavyotekeleza kazi zao, bali tumejaribu kuangalia namna tunaweza tukatumia sheria za haki za binadamu ambazo zatumika kote ulimwenguni na sheria za haki za binadamu ambazo zinaendelezwa na katiba yetu, kuhakikisha kuwa zile njia zinafanya kazi zinazoambatana na njia za haki za kibinadamu huku zikidhibiti uhuru wao. Na katika kutekeleza ile filosofia tulitembea sehemu nyingi tu nchini. Tulienda Baringo, Garissa, Isiolo, Kangema, Kericho, Kilifi, Kisumu, Kitui, Marsabit, Meru, Migori, Kuria, Nairobi, Narok, Odaya na Turkana. Na Jaji Mkuu, katika kule kutembea tulitumia mbinu tatu. Mbinu ya kwanza ilikuwa sisi tulifunzwa na wazee, watu ambao wana uzoefu wa muda mwingi wa kufanya kazi hii. Ya pili, tulifanya mikutano na wataalamu mbalimbali. Tulifanya na wataalamu ambao ni wa kisheria, wataalamu wa mambo ya kijamii, wataalamu wa mambo ya jitihada zingine za kuendeleza haki. Alafu pia tulijifunza kwa watu ambao walikuwa wameanza kufanya shughuli hizi wakishirikiana na koti. Na hizi tukaziita pilot projects. Zilikuwa ni 4. Moja ilikuwa ni kule Isiolo, nyingine ni Kericho, nyingine ni Kisumu, nyingine ni Kericho. Nyingine ni Narok. Na kutokana na mafunzo tuliyopata, kuna maswali ambayo tumejaribu kuyajibu katika ile sera. Yale maswali yameandikwa kwa lugha ya Kiingereza, kwa hivyo ndio yasoma kwa lugha ya Kiingereza, na hilo ndilo litakuwa ni wazo langu la mwisho kwa siku ya leo. Swali ya kwanza ambalo tumejaribu kulijibu katika ile sera ni to describe different mechanisms of accessing justice in Kenya, to look at the types of cases that are heard by the various institutions, to look at the role of ODPP in criminal cases, to look at how to ensure that these mechanisms adhere to constitutional values, to look at how to deal with questions of identity and customs that are not consistent with the Constitution, to look at how elders should be elected, and elders here also mean practitioners and other providers, to look at how women and marginalized minorities and other vulnerable groups can be included and their interests sustained, to look at appropriate ways of collaboration between the national administration and the county governments and these AJS mechanisms, to look at the minimum procedures required by these mechanisms for them to be consistent with the law, to look at how to blend these mechanisms with the customary law in such a way that we don't see customary law as this old, inflexible, and forever existing mechanism or system, to look at how lawyers and paralegals can relate to these systems, and to look at how these systems can enforce their rulings, and then lastly, to look at sustainability. Katika ile kazi, mwenyekiti, Jaji Mkuu, tumependekeza njia kadhaa ambazo tutasikiza siku ya leo, lakini muhimu sana ni kuwa tumependekeza kuwa ni muhimu sana hizi mbinu ziwe na uhuru wa kushirikiana na koti, lakini pia koti iwe na njia ambazo itazisaidia kuziendeleza hizi mbinu. Ili kuwa kazi hii ni upande mbili, zile mbinu zina shughuli za kufanya na zile koti zina shughuli za kufanya, ili zote zifikie katikati na kutengeza muundo mpya ambao utatupeleka mbele. Ni hayo tu. Nashukuru sana Jaji Mkuu. Asanteni.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steve, for those remarks. I hope we all now know what methodology and pedagogy means in Swahili. It is now the turn of some of our supporters and sponsors for this process. And we'll start with the Food and Agricultural Organization. As the CRJ said, FAO, UNODC, UNDP, and EU have been such great supporters of this process. In fact, most of the funding that came through FAO, UNODP, and UNODC came from the European Union, as well as the JPIP, which is a World Bank program that is supporting judiciary transformation. It is my pleasure to invite the UN representative to Kenya, Dr. Tobias Takavarasha, to come and talk to us on behalf of Food and Agricultural Organization. Welcome.
Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Chief Justice, EU Ambassador, colleagues from the UN, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations to Kenya for the 10 years since inauguration and the implementation of the Constitution 2010. Kenya has seen tremendous positive development and the fruits of devolution. It is indeed a great pleasure for us to be in this forum today, more so for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO, to be part of the launch and inauguration of the Alternative Justice Systems policy in Kenya. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 provided great optimism in determining and implementing sustainable policies and institutions that establishes strong relationship between people, livelihoods, systems, land, and natural resources. FAO is a specialized agency of the UN with a mandate of eradicating hunger, malnutrition, and poverty. FAO is a key stakeholder in the agriculture, livestock, fisheries, and natural resources sectors in Kenya, and has been working with the government of Kenya in all aspects of food, land, nutrition, security for decades. The capacity to ensure sustainable livelihoods, overcome poverty, and improve food and nutrition security is greatly influenced by the ability of the duty bearers who are government and the right holders who are communities and people to have effective conflict and disputes resolution mechanisms accepted by all. The United Nations delivery as one, and with the global commitment of the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind, is key in promoting justice, participation, and inclusion in the development agenda. Kenya has made tremendous progress in the implementation of the SDGs. We are glad to be associated with that success. Formal justice systems are sometimes characterized by delays, inconsistencies, uncertainty, and inadequacy of enforcement, etc. The development of alternative justice systems policy will definitely reduce the burden on courts, especially in marginalized areas, effectively address vulnerable communities, and recognize communal setup of our diverse cultures and traditions. Further, the recognition of these mechanisms are meant to strengthen the links between formal and informal justice systems rather than replace reliance on the formal system alone. Indeed, the ability of a government to promote inclusion and participation of its people in dispute resolution will go a long way to enhance peace and prosperity, and this will enable sustainable management of its resources. Consequently, this will enhance agricultural production, agribusiness, and sustainable management of land and natural resources for prosperity and job creation and economic development. Finally, I take this opportunity to thank the European Union, through His Excellency Simon Majul, the Ambassador, for their continuous support and funding in the actualization of the priorities of the government of Kenya, and in this regard, the funding of the Land Governance Program, namely support for the attainment of Vision 2030 through devolved land reforms in community lands of Kenya. The EU-funded program enabled us to support and work with the judiciary, and specifically in the development of this AJS policy. These entailed research, consultations with various stakeholders and communities, specifically touching on land and natural resources, which is the major factor of production in Kenya, but are prone to disputes and conflicts. I look forward to more partnership and synergies in supporting and actualizing this noble process in realizing food and nutrition security for all, sustainable national resources management, and economic development in Kenya. I once again wish to congratulate and thank the Chief Justice, AJS Task Force, and all partners who made this a success. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tobias, on behalf of FAO, and thank you for the support that FAO has extended to us. Let me now invite the regional representative for Eastern Africa of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, Dr. Armando Philip de Anders, to come and give his remarks. Welcome.
Good morning to everybody. Today is really a special day. For many reasons. We are celebrating the Constitution of Kenya, we are celebrating this wonderful launch, and we are celebrating my birthday. So members of the High Table, especially Honorable Justice Chief Maraga, EU Ambassador, Your Excellency Simon Murdu, Chair of the SJ Task Force, Honorable Justice Ngugi, President of the Court of Appeal, Justice William Uku, and I would like to also acknowledge the DPP, Mr. Haji, MC Duncan Okello, members of the task force, elders, my brother, Dr. Takabarasha, Country Director of FAO, my sister, representative of UNDP today. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, I'd like to begin by wishing everybody a happy Kativa Day. The first time that I came to Kenya 25 years ago, I realized that this was already a very special country. It is really a great pleasure to be here representing UNODC, not only as a regional director, but as a country director as well, and see what we are achieving together. This occasion as well is a key moment to sit down and reflect on what the Kenyan Constitution has done to all of us. For centuries, what is known as the alternative justice systems has been part of the DNA of the Kenyan society, that we know. It is remarkable, for example, to see that most of the disputes in Kenya, as high as 95, sometimes 97% of the disputes, are resolved through informal and non-state-based means outside the courts, all of them. But let me take you for just half minutes to reflect on the international context. What is happening in this region and what is happening in Kenya? Through my trips in the last 3 years, I've been able to work very closely with Eritrea, South Sudan, and with my colleagues, Charity, Rwanda. I've been able to also see what is happening in Somalia and Uganda. These are some countries in which alternative justice systems are happening. But today we are taking this alternative justice system and systems to the next level. The experience of stakeholders globally is that restorative justice programs hold considerable potential to more effectively address and repair the harm done by criminal offending. And if we take a little look at the, just quick look at the United Nations Handbook on Basic Principles on the Use of Restorative Justice Programs in Criminal Matters, we see that this handbook highlights how these kind of approaches can provide crime victims with a more powerful voice and also allow offenders to take responsibility in a meaningful way. Today, what we are launching really sets a precedent, but in the entire continent. A precedent that I have only seen in my 21 years working with the United Nations in 2 other countries in the world. One of them is Nepal, actually. The other one clearly is Kenya. Let me take you also for about half a minute again to talk a little bit about the tandem between the United Nations and the EU in support of this. The ability to access justice is really a crucial component for us, all of us, citizens, civil servants, private sector, civil society, for all of us to securing a peaceful, just, and inclusive society where effective and accountable institutions govern at all levels, as recognized by the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal number 16, and of course the entire Agenda 2030. Today, we share in the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Kenyan Constitution, your and our Constitution, and the release of the AJS Baseline Policy and Framework Policy, the same joy. This has another significance for UNODC, because for the past 2 years, I would say even a little bit more than 2 years, we've been supporting the Judiciary and its multi-stakeholder AJS task force with formulating the policy and determining how the alternative justice systems could be mainstream. And we are privileged to be key partners, working closely with the task force members alongside the European Union. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of some of the work we've been carrying out with the task force. For example, we have provided, as UNODC, the expertise to the task force and assisted with the policy and the framework drafting process, which we are going to see today. We've been supporting in staging a series of working retreats and discussions fora, which have been fundamental and instrumental in getting where we are right now today. We've been supporting in the logistics and secretariat and administrative support of the task force, and of course with the communications support, including video production, graphic design, and printing services. This has all been possible thanks to the Program for Legal Empowerment and Aid Delivery in Kenya, PLEAT, a partnership between the government of Kenya, the European Union and its delegation headed by Ambassador Murdu, the United Nations system, UNODC is one, but it's not the only one, UNDP and FAO are other contributors, and of course the civil society. In upholding international standards and norms, UNODC has taken great interest in the policy's intent and its content. For example, on aspects such as the protection of the most vulnerable and the nature of the cases that the alternative justice systems can hear, including, and specifically in these times of COVID-19, sexual and gender-based violence. Many members of our PLEAT team and UNODC have been very busy assisting the task force to prepare for this moment. And I would like to take a second to acknowledge especially our head of the entire program for the region, Charity Kwagwe. But I would also like to acknowledge the presence and the hard work of our project manager, Maria Temesvari, as well as our colleague and brother, Jafar Mohammed, who has really brought also expertise from the entire region. Judge Ngugi, on a personal note, and I've been requested to highlight this, we thank you not only for your intellectual rigor, but also for your good sense of humor, and for accompanying us and leading us in this process. A few words about the advantages of the alternative justice systems, and I emphasize the plural, systems. As you may have heard during the national conversation led by the task force leading to this launch, mainstreaming the alternative justice systems is a very complicated subject. It's not easy, not only because of the framework, but also because of the policy behind it, and the kind of baseline we have to use to get where we need to get. But the advantages of the alternative justice systems are many. Among them, it tends to be quicker and very, very flexible, and therefore holds considerable potential to produce and reduce the backlog of cases and provide equitable access to justice. So let me just close by saying that the process of mainstreaming the alternative justice system has received a really, really big boost today. But much more remains to be done to ensure that the policy is fully adopted and that the strategic objectives and the overall recommendations of the task force are really addressed over the next few months. The judiciary has a really positive role as part of its duty to remedy the gaps of the alternative justice systems, entities, and processes through working towards sustaining the alternative justice systems institutions by fulfilling its duty to make a plan of action for furtherance of these alternative justice systems. Furthermore, the judiciary and other stakeholders must be equipped to respect, protect, and I emphasize, transform this country's alternative justice systems as envisaged in our Constitution. It has been appropriate that the Alternative Justice System Task Force has enabled a wide cross-section of society to contribute, to really active contribute to this policy's creation, including the intervention of the councils of elders and, of course, of civil society. In closing, once again, I would like to highlight Ambassadors Murdu and the undeniable expertise and strength and policy support, but also political support. And I would like to also acknowledge the very strong financial, but also expertise support of the European Union to support the development of this policy. On behalf of UNODC, I hereby warmly congratulate Justice Ngugi, and of course Dr. Akot, and all task force members on the gift you are giving to this country, and especially to the future generations of Kenyans. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Philip, and happy birthday. And thank you for that regional outlook. I would like now to welcome the chairperson of the Samburu Council of Elders, Mrs. Joyce Lesigi. You heard that right. It is Samburu, it is elders, and it is Mrs. Welcome.
Mgeni wetu wa heshima, jaji wetu mkuu wa nchi ya Kenya, naibu jaji mkuu Mama Philomena Mwilu, the chairperson wa Elders Council Bwana Peri Sirutere, na wageni wengine wote mashuhuri ambao wako katika kikao hiki, hamjambo. Ninaitwa Joyce Nairesia, nimetoka katika kaunti ya Isiolo, nina share Samburu Elders Council. Siku hii nzuri muhimu katika taifa letu la Kenya ni kwa sababu inalete Kenya ama wa Kenya pamoja. Sisi kama jamii ya Isiolo tumeweza kutumia hii njia nyingine mbadala ya kutatua mizozo, tukitumia namna na kuketi chini kama wazee na kutatua shida nyingi. Watu wengi wanajua wakati moja kwamba tulikuwa na mizozo Isiolo, maana Isiolo iko kabila nyingi sana. Kuna kabila nyingi zinaishi Isiolo, tunatofautiana lugha. na sisi ni wafugaji ama jamii ya pastoralist. Kazi yetu kubwa ni ufugaji, tunafuga mahali. Na tunapokuwa na wakati ya kiangazi kama sasa, tunapigana sisi kwa sisi. Tukinyang'anyana maji, tukinyang'anyana nyazi, kunakuwa na ile namna tunapigana mpaka katika nchi inaitwa hotspot. Lakini sasa tangu tujue alternative ama namna ingine ya kutatua misoso, tukaelimishwa na Judiciary ambaye nina shukrani za kipekee. Ninaona walimu wangu wengi mali hapa kama Professor Joel Ngoge amekuwa mwalimu kutoka mwaka wa 2011 tangu tuanzie kufanya hii kazi. Na ninasimama kama mama kiongozi na kama mama mzee. Wamama wasidanganywe kwamba si wazee, ni wazee. Wakati unachukuliwa na mzee akiwa kijana na mnaenda mpaka mnafika yeye anaitwa mzee, wewe umebaki wapi mama? Hata wewe ni mzee, unaweza ona kitu ambaye akifai katika jamii, katika nchi, unatoa sauti. Mimi nimekaa kwa baraza la wazee tangu mwaka wa 2011 na mpaka wazee wa Wasamburu wakaniambia sasa wewe ndio chair. Ninashukuru Mungu kwa sababu nimefanya mambo mengi. Hiyo kazi ya elders haina malipo yoyote, ni Mungu analipa. Na ujue kazi ya kulipwa na Mungu ina dhamana mingi sana. Maana ninatembea Isiolo, tumekaa mahali mbalimbali, na ninatembea na miguu yangu, ninatumia mfuko wangu, na ninahakikisha kwamba jamii ya Wasamburu hawatachokosa wa Somali, hawatachokosa wa Borona, hawatachokosa wa Meru na hawatachokosa wa Turukana. Maana hiyo ndio the 5 major tribes ambayo iko katika kaunti ya Isiolo. Na ninaomba Wakenya wale wananitazama mchana wa leo kwamba wamama ni wazee. Tafadhali wakati wazee wanakaa chini, hata wamama wapatiwe nafasi watoe maoni katika ile msoso. Na tutakapofanya hivyo kama nchi, tutapunguza maneno mengi, na hata yale tunayoona katika macho hatutayaona tena. Mseseti akiwa mahali pale anajua tumeng'ang'ana sana na maneno ya ukeketaji ya wasichana, na sasa Isiolo ni free zone katika kila jambo. Nashukuru Mungu sana kwa sababu ya siku ya leo, maana hii alternative wa Kenya katika nchi yetu wanaona, na tunasema ni njia ambayo inasaidia. Kesi ikiletwa kwa wazee itatajwa siku moja, inasikizwa siku hiyo, na ruling inapatikana saa hiyo tu. Sio ile yetu ya koti itatajwa mwaka inaenda chini. Na unatumia gharama kuja kotini, na inawacha chuki kati ya ndugu na ndugu. Lakini alternative justice system inawacha Wakenya wakiwa wamekaa kama ndugu, jirani, jamii pamoja, mke na bwana wamekaa pamoja. Tumepunguza kesi nyingi sana katika koti yetu ya Isiolo. Watu wa Judiciary, tembeeni Isiolo muone koti yetu haina kesi nyingi zimerundikana. Kesi ya mpaka tunatatua kama jamii, kesi ya bibi na bwana tunatatua, kuku ya mwingine na mwingine tunatatua. Kwa hivyo hatuna ile conflict kidogo iko katika koti yetu ya Isiolo. Mungai angekuwa hapa angewaambia yeye anafanya tu kazi polepole, hana ile msukumo ya kufanya kazi. Kwa sababu gani? Kesi ikikuwa ile kidogo anarifaa kwa wazee wanaenda wanaketi chini, wanatatua na kesi inamalizika na siku moja. Unajua saa zingine ukipeleka kesi kotini, lawyer anabadilisha kitu nyekundu kuwa nyeusi. Hata ile unaona. Lakini kwa wazee ni ile haki na straight, haina ile msukumo. Kwa hivyo langu nikisimama hapa, nataka kabisa kuhimiza wamama wa Kenya kwamba wamama ni wazee. Wajitokeze katika kutatua misoso katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, katika jamii zetu na hata katika nchi yetu, na tutakaa kwa amani. Kwa sababu alternative system iko na amani nyingi sana. Haiwachangi watu wakiwa bado wamesosana, hapana. Watawacha watu wakiwa ndugu na ndugu. Kwa hivyo langu ninataka kushukuru sana Judiciary kwa sababu ya yale mambo ambayo wameweza kutenda katika kaunti yetu ya Isiolo. Sisi ndio watu ambayo tumefaidikia alternative justice system. Na kama Wakenya muamini, karibuni Isiolo kwa moyo mkunjufu. Kuna siku ambayo inatengwa tu nitoe Wasamburu prison, na ninaenda huko nakutanisha parties zote, wanakaa pamoja, na ninatoa wale rumandisi ya kesi kidogo kidogo. Unajua ni lazima vikombe igongane katika sahani, na sasa unakuta kuna mtu amekimbisha kotini. Tunatoa sisi watu wa Isiolo, tunafanya, na Mungu ameweza kutusaidia kupitia hii. Nataka pia kumshukuru jaji mstaafu Willy Mutunga, yeye ndiye alipatia Isiolo hiyo kama pilot project, na ninajua alitupatia kitu kisuri. Mungu amsaidie na muongezee miaka ya kuishi. Ni kwa sababu ametutendea kitu mzuri sana. Kwa hivyo Wakenya, kama unanitazama, wamama wanatosha na wamama ni wasee. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very inspiring and very revealing. Thank you very much, Mrs. Joyce Lesigi. Now, it is my pleasure to invite the European Union Ambassador to Kenya, Mr. Simon Modue, who's really been supportive of this project. Welcome, His Excellency.
Honourable Chief Justice, Honourable Deputy Chief Justice, Chief Registrar, Secretary of Public Prosecutions, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, including everybody who's watching online, it really is a great honour to be part of what I would describe as a momentous occasion here today, representing the European Union. I think what's being launched today, it's a cornerstone policy for Kenya. It's one that will ultimately bring customary and traditional means of dispute resolution from the periphery into the mainstream, and it will recognise the legitimate place of alternative systems in contemporary justice administration in this country. And in doing so, this new policy will also dispel myths about alternative justice systems. And I think importantly, it will also fulfill a promise that was made to Kenyans in their constitution. Justice Ngugi, I realise that this launch event was postponed due to the pandemic, but I think we can take something positive from the unforeseen circumstances of coronavirus, because what better way to mark Katiba Day, in particular the 10th anniversary of the promulgation of this nation's constitution, by gathering here today to celebrate this milestone. Your constitution obligates the judiciary to promote traditional methods of dispute resolution, and promoting such alternative justice systems should, in my view, contribute as well to the expansion of the fundamental human rights anchored in your constitution, alongside such embodied principles as the rule of law, citizen participation, social justice, inclusiveness, equality and discrimination. This is welcomed by the European Union. And we're recognising that the dispute resolution procedures differ from community to community. We just heard the very eloquent presentation by the elder from the Samburu community. And I think what's been great about this approach is that the judiciary established a multi-stakeholder task force to formulate an appropriate just judicial policy on AGS, and looking at ways of adapting these different approaches community to community by doing so. Now, it's clear that the work of the AGS task force has not been easy. It's been complex. And we're delighted to have been able to provide support through the UNODC and walk this walk with the task force for what has been a journey, I think, of nearly 2 years. Our programme, which has provided this support, called the PLEAD programme, it's actually the European Union's largest justice sector programme in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. I think one of the things that is interesting as well, when one looks in the kind of cases that have classically in front of the formal judicial system today, I think we see that something like 70% of all the cases in the formal judicial system today are related to land and natural resources, with over 16,000 cases pending in the Environment and Land Court. We've got over 9,000 land-related court cases which have been running between 3 years and in some cases still not resolved after 30 years. And what we're seeing in particular is that this most affects vulnerable communities, women and youth. And I think one further contribution that we hope we can make is through the EU-funded land governance programme being implemented by the FAO, which is trying as well in parallel to contribute to enhancing the transparency and efficiency of this system, and is a key part as well of developing Kenya's capacity in the agricultural development and environmental conservation areas. Chief Justice, I hope this underlines why it is so satisfying for us today as a key development partner to be celebrating this milestone with you here today. What we are seeing is that the alternative justice processes can help reduce the burden on courts and are meant to strengthen as well the links between formal and informal justice systems rather than replace reliance on courts. And I think one specific target we've set in the PLEAD programme is to achieve a 50% reduction in the backlog of criminal cases by 2022. And I think that's really fantastic news for everyone. Well, perhaps with the exception of those who are increasingly finding themselves in the sidelines of the excellent cooperation between the EACC and the DPP and are perhaps future guests or clients of yours shortly, Chief Justice. Now, I think one of the things we've seen is that the AGS can play a key role in reducing this backlog. I think one of the things I also just want to flag is that in pursuit of its mandate, the task force, which itself comprised a cross-section of stakeholders, has shaped its outputs through a really quite participatory process, involving Kenyans from all walks of life. I think we're seeing this as well replicated today in this launch event where thousands of people are able to tune in live, and this is a welcome extension of this. And I think this conversation is very much set to continue and engaging elders, justice institutions, local administrations, civil society, citizens and the media as we move towards mainstreaming the AGS. So in conclusion, Justice Ngugi, Dr. Akoff and all task force members, the comprehensive and inclusive approach you've taken and the quality of your work really is to be commended. Congratulations. And we very much hope on the side of the European Union that the AGS baseline policy and framework will have far-reaching consequences in fostering effective access to justice for all Kenyans. I know how much support the Chief Justice gave to you on this. I'm grateful to see this, and we look forward to continuing our support for the full adoption and implementation of the AGS policy. Thank you very much. Asante Sana.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it's time to invite the chair of the task force, Justice Joel Ngugi. Philip said that Joel has humor and intellect, but he forgot to say that he's also a slave driver of sorts. A trait he shares with the Chief Justice when they're impatient for results. Joel, you're welcome.
Honorable Chief Justice, Your Excellency, Ambassador Modiu, Honorable Deputy Chief Justice, Honorable Anna Madi, the CRJ, our special guest, Ms. Dorcas Oduor from ODPP, all distinguished guests. Permit me to begin with what Supreme Court Justice Isaac Lenaola, in his capacity as Samburu Elder, taught me to say to a distinguished congregation like this: I fear you all. As has been mentioned by previous speakers, it is singularly appropriate that we are here to launch the AJS policy on Katiba Day. We cannot pay obeisance to our Constitution in a more fitting fashion than to animate the letter and spirit of the most instructive clause on the administration of justice, that is Article 159 of the Constitution. I wish to thank our Honorable Chief Justice for the patience he exhibited by several times extending the tenure of the task force to complete its task. Readers will quickly realize upon perusal of the baseline policy that our pedagogies and organic methodologies necessitated the length of time that it took to complete the task. When we talk about AJS, sometimes scary and stereotypical images of graying old men in monkey skins, snuffing tobacco, maybe coughing raw blood. Sometimes they come to our mind. But as Mama Joyce Neresia of Samburu Council of Elders has demonstrated here today, that stereotype is a false one. AJS practitioners are both men and women, both young and old, both able-bodied and differently abled. And sometimes they include shoshomanyangas like Mama Neresia. And AJS mechanisms do not only exist in remote rural areas occupied by single ethnic groups, but also in cosmopolitan, urban, and peri-urban areas like Isiolo. This policy is an appreciative nod to the everyday justice work that Wazee, like George Chacha in Kuria, does every day, or the justice work of Sheikh Ahmed Set in Isiolo, or Chief Jacinta Gashu in Othaya, or Deputy County Commissioner Caroline Imaya in Embu, or Mama Esther Saingeu of Olposumaru in Narok, or Francis Mogo in Kipkelion, or Chief Inspector of Police Njomo of Nakuru Central Police Station, or even Father David Kaberia of Igembe South. This policy says to all the wonderful practitioners of AJS throughout the country that your justice labors are recognized and that your justice endeavors are legitimate under the Constitution of Kenya. Nyinyi ni mashujaa. This policy is about the present, not the past. It is about normative frameworks relevant to the 21st century, not unrealistic slices of a romantic past straight from the Cultural Museum. This policy is about animating our transformative constitution, not about reliving a past accentuated by any form of oppression, including patriarchal oppression. This policy is about aggrandizing human autonomy, not shrinking human rights and human dignity. That is why we are excited today to have you, Chief Justice, launch this policy to mark the end of the first phase, that of formulation of the policy. But we are also excited to enter the second phase, that of implementation of the policy. We thank our faithful partners who stood with us throughout the long and torturous journey of generating this policy. The judiciary and the CRJ is our biological mother. We understood your economic difficulties and accepted it when you gave us up for adoption, but still remained in our lives. UNODC became, for all intents and purposes, our adoptive parent. We thank you for the investment. We still need you, Mama UNODC. The Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the UNODP, the IDLO, and JPIP became our loving uncles. And often, they resolved our financial problems when our adoptive parent had to pay steep school fees for our elder brother, the ODPP. But we also want to thank our rich cousins, ICJ Kenya, LRF, FIDA Kenya, Pamoja Trust, and Diaconia, who often generously came to our aid, and sometimes even shared their pocket money with us. Even our other cousin, who has dual citizenship, the Swedish Embassy, pitched in sometimes. We say thank you to all of you. We've just turned the age of majority. As we find our own in the world, we will come back to you for further guidance and financial help, especially financial help. Finally, permit me to thank all the members of the task force, perhaps the only task force in the history of the nation which had no designated budget. And perhaps this was a metaphorical epitaph for AJS. I salute each and every one of you today. And if I may take a minute, please, and ask you to stand so that we recognize you, I will appreciate. Please give me the honor of standing so that we recognize you wherever you are. Thank you very much, colleagues. You have earned my lifetime of gratitude, respect, and admiration for accomplishing this task with such missionary zeal. Finally, Lord Chief Justice, the National Chair of Elders, Mr. Forrest Rutere, has asked me to give you this message that he had, that you might be retiring soon. And he has told me that you're very much welcome to join the Council of Elders in Nyamira to help resolve disputes during your retirement. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Right, thank you very much, Joel. I think you've forgotten your mask here. Thank you very much. Let me proceed and invite the representative of the Office of the DPP, Dorcas Oduo, who is the Secretary of ODPP.
Honorable Chief Justice, allow me to adopt the salutations as directed by Duncan. Ladies and gentlemen, our development partners, distinguished guests, it's a pleasure for me to be before you this morning to represent the Director of Public Prosecutions who could not be here because of other engagements. I will therefore proceed and read his statement that he gave to me. I'm honored to join in the launch of the landmark policy on the alternative justice systems. This is specifically because AJS cuts across the entire justice system, including the criminal justice system. And in the criminal justice system, it has the potential to change the trajectory of how we administer criminal justice system. We acknowledge that Kenya is a country with diverse race, culture, ethnicity, and religion. Kenyan people are proud of their ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity and restate their determination to live in peace and unity. The Constitution, which is people-based, envisions a multifaceted, pluralistic judicial operative system that recognizes the coexistence of alternative dispute resolution and alternative justice systems which will live alongside the formal justice system. There has been amendment and enactment of many legislations in order to align them to the new constitution. And they introduced the notion of the use of alternative forms of dispute management, including reconciliation, mediation, and traditional conflict resolution mechanisms as part of the legal framework on access to justice across various sectors in Kenya. However, there has not been a comprehensive guideline or policy in place on how these mechanisms should be utilized in enhancing access to justice. As such, the implementation of the various sectoral provisions on alternative dispute resolution has been left to the concerned stakeholders, and thus presenting uncertainty on procedures or extent of application of such alternative justice resolution mechanisms. The use of alternative justice systems can reduce the time that it takes to resolve disputes, particularly in tribunals and traditional and alternative justice systems, and it can diminish the backlog of cases experienced by the courts. As we are aware, to resolve all disputes through litigation is untenable, particularly as it may unnecessarily burden the formal legal system. As far as the criminal justice system is concerned, we are excited because this gives credence to alternatives to prosecutions. Mechanisms like diversion will significantly reduce the incarceration of petty offenders. Alternative justice system, when properly utilized in the criminal justice system, will enhance the participation of victims who are now active participants in the criminal justice system. And it will also enhance restoration and thereby giving quality justice. This launch marks an important milestone in the entrenchment and promotion of alternative justice system as a strategy for enhancing access to justice and the expeditious delivery thereof. The policy will not only provide guiding principles on the types of cases that will be determined and the interrelation of such application, if any, with the court process. It will also formalize and effectively legitimize some of the very noble traditional practices as envisaged under the Constitution. I'm particularly enthusiastic about a structured mechanism for the alternative justice system that is more responsive to the needs of women and girls who are the majority disadvantaged by the traditional mechanisms of resolving disputes. I join hands with my colleagues to express my gratitude to our partners, especially the European Union, the UNODC for their generous support in the development of alternative justice system. I'm smiling because he was saying the UNODC preferred ODPP to the alternative justice system task force. Finally, I congratulate the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court and the members of the task force for the development of the alternative justice system policy. I look forward to the implementation of the same. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dorcas Oduor and the DPP. Let me also recognize the presence of the UNDP Country Director, Mandila Mashongolo. They've been very supportive of this process as well, and she's graced this occasion with her presence. Thank you very much. Before I invite the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, I just want to say that it's Katiba Day, so I decided to bring this Constitution with me today. This is one of the 3 copies of the Constitution that President Kibaki signed on the 27th of August 2010, and it is in the CJ's office. It is the custody of the CJ, and if I may reveal one secret CJ of your office, he displays it transparently and openly in his chambers, not in the drawer, so that he can see it every single day as he does his work. So CJ, I just want to thank you for doing that. We have to remember that this Constitution cost lives and limbs, and it has to be protected and upheld. It is my pleasure on that note to invite the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya and Vice President of the Supreme Court, Honorable Lady Justice Philomena Mbete Mwilu, to give her remarks and invite the Chief Justice to address the congregation. Honorable Mwilu.
My Lord, the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, and who is also the President of the Apex Court, and all of us, people of God, and on this very important day of the Katiba Day, I'm very delighted to be here that God has made it possible for me to celebrate these 10 years of the launch of the launch first of the Judiciary alternative justice systems on such an important day as 10 years of celebrating our Constitution. As we join millions of Kenyans across the country in commemorating the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 10 years ago, it is particularly apt that the judiciary is launching this key policy document today. It illustrates what should remain the judiciary's focus, and that of all in public service, this is a solemn delegated authority, and that the sovereign power of the people of Kenya is immanent. Indeed, the practices in the alternative justice systems that we formally recognize today present due exercise of this sovereignty. As the AJS policy states, majority of disputes in Kenya are resolved through these alternative mechanisms. I place the word alternative in apostrophes, as to me, it is a misnomer. The description alternative is a result of colonial and post-colonial knowledges and practices that vulgarized the formal justice system and disfigured, denied, and erased the legitimacy of all other mechanisms used to access justice in Kenya. What is the rationale basis upon which we can call the everyday practices of justice provision across our country alternative, when it is the formal system of courts and tribunals that are indeed practical, reality, and orthodox? To me, the alternative justice systems is the real thing. Ladies and gentlemen, my Lord the Chief Justice, while recognizing this systemic bias, this ought not to be about competing structures and norms, but rather how we can better improve all practices of justice provision for a more just, equal, and equitable society. Under the Constitution 2010, the judiciary is charged with recognizing and promoting AJS. We must go beyond this and learn from these systems and techniques that, to significant extents, make the justice they dispense more organic and more permeating. Discursive techniques, contextuality, restitutive, and reconciliatory aspirations, and a more complete consideration of both the individual and the community are a few areas in which we can seek to improve our formal justice practices from those of AJS. On the other hand, basic constitutional tenets of equality, fair procedure, representation, non-discrimination, well entrenched and enunciated in formal justice provision, must receive more deliberate attention across the AJS practices. The cross-fertilization of ideas and methods between all these justice practices and mechanisms will improve each and deepen justice provision in the country. My Lord the CJ, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity, even if I'm unworthy, to laud our immediate former Chief Justice, Honorable Dr. Willie Mutunga's vision in establishing the task force on traditional, informal, and other mechanisms used to access justice in this country. And you, my Lord Chief Justice, David Maraga, for ensuring that the task force delivered on its important mandates. We just had Joel, in his usual style, talking to us about this. If it wasn't for the two of you, we would not be here. You and the Honorable Chief Justice Willie Mutunga, may The Lord God remember you kindly. The SJS policy is, to me, the beginning of a structured, natural conversation on how the judiciary can promote AJS in accordance with the purposes and principles of the Constitution for the benefit of the peoples and communities of Kenya. This is a very important and deliberate conversation, and due care, thought, consideration must be given by all those that must engage in it. The realization of the vision of the judiciary and justice provision in Kenya, as contained in the Constitution, is a process. The AJS policy is an important step towards ensuring that the judiciary truly reflects the letter and the spirit of Article 159. The policy is a milestone that further encapsulates the paradigm shift within the institution that was begun by the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. We must continue to break down those ossifying conceptual structures of legal thought and practice inherited from other colonial and post-colonial texts that serve to alienate judicial practice from substantive justice provision. In recognizing, promoting, and enabling not other, not alternative, but associated sister forms of justice provision of the self-determination of identification, the judiciary AJS policy is a positive leap in the right direction. The judiciary's journey towards realizing and fulfilling the spirit and the letter of the Constitution mirrors our nation's continued journey in constitutional implementation. The Constitution 2010 is not just a document. It contains the framework, principles, and guidelines of a very active process. The promulgation on 27th of August 2010 was the culmination of the struggle by the people of Kenya to constitute a new Kenya based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. The mere fact of promulgation did not, however, constitute the Kenya envisaged in the articles of the document. Now, this constituting act is continuous and it is constant. It is therefore incumbent upon all Kenyans, and particularly those whom the delegated sovereignty of the people of Kenya is exercised, to always strive to constitute the Kenya that was envisaged in the Constitution 2010. My Lord Chief Justice, and all of us present today, I thank you very much for honoring our invitation to attend this important occasion for the judiciary family. I thank our partners, particularly, especially our development partners, for your continued cooperation and support. I must congratulate, as I do now, the AJS task force, ably chaired by my younger brother, Professor Joel Ngugi, for the great work that went into reaching the compilation of the AJS policy. I thank you, all of you, for listening to me. I wish you a prayerful and reflective Katiba Day. And I pray that the Lord God will bless us all, that the Lord God will bless the judiciary of Kenya, and that the Lord God will bless this country as it celebrates 10 years of its 2010 Constitution. It is now my honor, my duty and privilege and pleasure to invite the Honorable the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, the Honorable Mr. David Kenani Maraga Justice, to give his address to us today and to officially launch the Judiciary Alternative Justice Systems Policy. My Lord, the Chief Justice.
The Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, the European Union Ambassador, Mr. Modu, Justice Choi Ngugi, the Chair of the Agis, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me start first by thanking Justice Ngugi for getting me a job. And I want to appeal to the chairperson of the Samburu elders. I'll come to you for lessons on how to hear a case and determine it on the same day. It is a revering thing. Before I say anything about the event for which we are gathered here today, please permit me to ask all of you to stand up so that we mark a momentous event whose 10th anniversary we celebrate today, the promulgation this day of the Kenya 20 Constitution. Please stand up. Thank you very much. You can sit down. The choice of today as the day on which we launch this important policy was not accidental. Bearing in mind the aspect of that policy that we are launching and the mandate of the judiciary in employing all alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Thank you very much for coming and being here with us today. For us at the judiciary, and indeed for all Kenyans, the new constitution set us on a path of renewal and transformation. If you look back to the judiciary that served Kenyans 10 years ago and compare it with the institution as it is today, you will agree with me that we have come a very long way indeed. The promulgation of the Constitution marked the end of many years of painstaking effort by many Kenyans who believed that our promise as a nation could only be nestled in the progressive Constitution that safeguarded our liberties, provided an equitable platform for the enjoyment of national wealth, and laid the foundation for the moral and ethical rebirth of our country. Looking back at the journey so far, we recognize that the realization of constitutional nirvana does not come entirely from a single day event, but from the unwavering dedication of many stakeholders who must protect it and nurture it into a national way of life. We at the Judiciary have been on the path of reform since 2010 and continue forging ahead with steadfast dedication. In this path, we have embraced a framework for accountability anchored on the need to expand access to justice for all the people of Kenya. Indeed, the Judiciary has done a lot to reduce the interface with Wanjiku while guiding the country towards becoming a constitutional democracy and guarded by the rule of law and other values enshrined in Article 10 of our Constitution. Further, the Judiciary has, through its key blueprints, the Judiciary Transformation Framework and the Sustaining Judiciary Transformation, a service delivery agenda, mapped out the institutional guidelines for identifying and promoting alternative systems of justice. It is within this context that my predecessor, Chief Justice Will Mutunga, appointed the Task Force on Traditional Justice Systems way back in March 2016. Owing to the critical work this task force has been undertaking, I gave 2 extensions to their term to enable them accomplish what was by all means the enormous task of enabling the judiciary's design and implementation of its mandate under Article 159(2) of the Constitution, and to develop a policy to mainstream alternative justice systems in the country. All this was part of the mission to enhance access to justice and to support expeditious delivery of justice. One of the core principles laid down in the Constitution to guide the administration of justice and the exercise of judicial authority is the requirement to embrace alternative forms of dispute resolution, including traditional dispute resolution mechanisms. This requirement is a fundamental shift from the approach to the idea and the concept of justice, especially in our Kenyan context. Kenyan communities have for generations developed their own justice systems that have held and continue to hold societies together. While justice dispensed by the courts has occupied the center stage in the administration of justice, the reality is that the vast majority of disputes, as much as 90% among Kenyans, are resolved through justice systems that are outside the formal court process. Therefore, the constitutional guidance to embrace and recognize alternative justice systems is located within a wider frame of response that addresses holistically the concept of justice in the Kenyan context. Today, I'm glad to launch the policy that outlines how we can promote alternative justice systems in Kenya. The formulation of the policy marks an important milestone in Kenya's endeavor towards the fulfillment, respect, observance, promotion, and the protection of the right to access justice. The policy gives effect to Article 159(2)(c) of the Constitution, which is the legal and the constitutional framework on the multiple systems for dispute resolutions in Kenya. In treating the provisions of Article 159(2)(c) as both substantive and facilitative, the policy has also made use of various provisions of the Constitution, such as Article 1, Article 10, Article 11, Article 48, and Article 60. That way, the policy constitutes a consolidated corpus that guides both dispute prevention and resolution. That's why it is suitable to be called a policy for alternative justice systems. This policy is thus a critical output for the future of administration of justice, and specifically the manner in which judicial services can be offered while taking cognizance of the wider justice processes in the country. There is no doubt that the alternative justice systems hold great promise in enhancing access to justice in a holistic sense of the concept. This policy makes clear recommendations and viable options on how judicial system and alternative justice systems can interact in a manner that is mutually reinforcing and focused on an effective system of justice in the country. It brings together the processes that we undertake in courts, as well as those ones that are undertaken by our people in various parts of the country. The policy has also identified the useful and immediate steps to be taken in order to animate this important aspect of the administration of justice. These include identification of matters to be brought under HIS. You know that there are some matters that we do not recommend for alternative dispute resolution, such as some of the criminal aspects of the matter, unless they are the kind that can be resolved without much harm. Regulation of the practitioners of HIS, appropriate procedures and processes in HIS, appropriate interventions and resource allocation to support the process. As we launch this policy today, I'm especially proud that Kenya is blazing a new, brave and initiative path in this regard. The United Nations, in its Sustainable Development Goals, has explicitly recognized that progress on peace and development depends on the creation of inclusive societies in which the rule of law and human rights are respected. Further, SDG 16 emphasizes that realizing respective, inclusive, and just societies provides the foundation for achieving all other SDGs. SDG 16.3 is explicit that no tool is more powerful in facilitating sustainable development than the promotion of the rule of law and access to justice. Yet, the United Nations estimates that up to 1.5 billion people worldwide have justice problems they cannot resolve. This number includes people who are victims of unreported violence or a crime, or people who have a civil or administrative justice problem they cannot resolve, such as a dispute over land or the denial of public service. Thirdly, some of those people in this bracket are here in this country. These people without access to justice are victims of the justice gap that characterizes many countries. As the UN recognizes in the report Justice for All, the justice gap is both a reflection of structural inequalities as well as a contributor to those inequalities. The UN report suggests the need to rethink the world's approaches to enabling access to justice to address this veritable justice gap. Among the two suggestions made by the UN report are the need to activate people-centered justice services and the need to make justice services work to prevent injustice, not just in a resolution of disputes. I'm glad that the launch of this policy in Kenya heralds an innovation of our justice sector, which meets these twin goals. Alternative justice systems, as espoused in this policy, are community-centered and reflect the lived realities of the people and therefore eminently more accessible to most people. They also achieve justice differently. They prevent injustice and reduce harm suffered by people by focusing on root causes of justice and on justice needs of the entire communities and societies, rather than the just individuals who are involved. This is why it is critical that this policy is seen as a momentous step towards fulfilling the transformational agenda of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, by both unleashing the transformative potential of alternative justice systems and embracing sociological and situated jurisprudence required by the Constitution. This policy offers a dialogic space for both the judiciary and alternative justice systems to deliver on the transformative vision of the Kenya Constitution, reversal of structures that lead to gender oppression, social injustices and stigma, cultural domination, disruptive and social injustice, and other forms of oppression. That transformational agenda involves another aspect highlighted by the policy we launched today. That is, alternative justice systems indeed, as all other justice systems, can only be transformational if they lead to fair outcomes and if they have certain minimal features of procedural fairness. This is why the Constitution requires that Agis mechanisms are only legitimate if they adhere to the constitutional minimums. They must not violate the Bill of Rights, and they must comply with international human rights principles. In proposing and unbundling a clear human rights obligations framework, this policy sets out both a conceptual framework of how the Bill of Rights and the international human rights principles cohere with HIS and act to aggrandize rather than diminish human autonomy and human rights, as well as pragmatic guidelines for doing so. This policy, therefore, not only charts a clear path forward for promoting alternative justice systems as commanded by the Constitution, it also provides a clear framework for mitigating the human rights challenges that are often associated with the HIS mechanisms. It is therefore an important guide on the operationalization of the systems, not only for the judiciary, but also for all the institutions in the justice sector. I have no doubt whatsoever that if we embrace the way the communities go resolving their disputes and assist them where need be, we will go a long way in resolving several disputes, some of which end up in court and should not come to court. As I said earlier, I'm impressed by some of the elders and the way they carry out their work, and particularly the chairperson of the Samburu Council of Elders, who impressed me here about the way they carry out their duties. Very informal. They give a fair hearing to the parties and deliver justice. After all, if you look at Article 159 of the Constitution, it requires us not to adhere to technical jurisprudence, as some other people have called it, so that the technical issues that are not really important in a resolution process should be left out, and we want to encourage the traditional systems to do that, but be fair to all of the parties and resolve quite a number of disputes. With that, I want to also join the others in thanking our supporters, the UNODC, the Food and Agriculture Organization, UNDP, KPIP, IDLO, and others without whose support the formulation of this policy would not have been possible. I also wish to thank the members of the task force. Please stand up once again. I want you to know that we appreciate the work you have done under the chairmanship of Professor Ngugi, and the trouble you took going around the country and gathering views to come up with this policy. Please sit down. It is now for us to implement the policy, and as I said, see how it can interface with the systems that we carry forward for service delivery to our people. Once again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for listening to me. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable the Chief Justice, for your address. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of this session, and I just want to reiterate that we are launching 2 documents. There is the AGIS Baseline Policy Framework. This is a 121-page document, 10 chapters that deals with the discourses around AGIS and all those academic questions you may want to ask from the conceptual framework.